marginalized groups are Indigenous women. And Indigenous women who are working class, living in reservations, experience more violence because they are less protected by the state and because the history of racism they have experienced for centuries. Sexual violence is a tool of genocide for years and has been used for years. And it first started by race. Just like colonization in the US, for example, that's an example of genocide. When the Europeans came and colonized Native Americans, they used rape as a form of genocide and erasing many groups. One example of sexual violence is incest. Incest means unwanted sexual contact from family, and this can have a long-lasting effect and trauma to the survivor. A film called Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women is an example of how the government is a bystander. There are so many Indigenous women missing and reports are not getting updated. It even goes missing in the media and in the news. And there are activists currently working with missing Indigenous women. And Seattle is one of the top highest cities of Indigenous women. And this data was collected since 2018. It's shocking to know how recent this data is. The picture that you see here, I got this from an article from the Missing Indigenous Women. And this ribbon skirt is a form of cultural clothing that represents the sacredness of American Indian and Alaska Native women and the deep connections of their bodies and spirits have to the land. Just like a skirt, each American Indian and Alaska Native community has its own beauties and stories of resilience despite multiple ribbons of trauma and violence stacked upon them. We chose to represent the study's finding in this way to honor the sacredness of our urban missing and murdered Indigenous women's rights and girls. Their prayers we hold in them and their responsibility, we have to care for their stories. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm going to share some more groups that are marginalized as well. So I do want to mention like the Black Lives Matter movement right now, they are hurting part of the marginalized groups, especially because of police brutality. And another group that is part of the marginalized community is like the LGBTQ community as well. They are also at risk of police brutality and are even get punished from their own families too, whether it's coming out. And I also want to talk about the people who are in the like disability community. So one thing I want to say about them is that the media makes people see able-bodied as a normal thing, and it's exclusive with people with disabilities. Like when you think about movies, like and how they're built, like movies that are about about somebody who has a mental disability, like it's seen as a bad for them, or it's seen as horror. Like this is where the stigma comes from, like referring people as crazy, but in reality, what they need is support such as mental health services. In addition, police aren't unfortunately trained, they're not trained enough to know about this stuff. And research and statistics suggest that people with disabilities may or may be likely to be the victim, maybe the perpetrator of the violence. So like they're not the ones causing violence, it's like violence done to them. So I know I'm explaining a lot of things, I'm gonna get there. For women, women are also part of the marginalized community. Women have fought to get equal pay, reproductive freedom, and better representation in the media because they have been objectified sexually and are seen more as an object than a person. And this is like where third wave of feminism came in, intersection of race and class. So this is where intersectionality fits in. And the wage gap still exists. Women need to work twice as harder than men. They need to have more degrees just to be at the same level as a guy who has just 1 degree. And this is really common in corporate positions. So for example, like sons are more likely to get passed down a CEO job than the daughter. And women of color experience more discrimination and prejudice than a white woman. Census data shows how white women get paid more than women of color. And then again, with low income being part of the marginalized group. And I also want to put light on the undocumented community as well. They don't have choices on voting, especially during this pandemic. They don't have no relief funds from the federal government as well. So it's harder for them to get the resources they need. So I talked a lot about marginalized communities and the barriers they face, and now I want to talk about privilege, cisgender privilege. I know majority of people have a lot of cis privilege. I know I do have, I have a lot of cis privilege too. And what's cisgender, what that means is that you're identifying with the gender that was given to you at birth. So for example, I'm a female, I'm still a female. And so on the next slide, I'm gonna show you things that, it's a list of questions that I'm gonna read out loud. And I want you all to answer these in your head. Feel free to write them down. You'll be shocked by like what your answers are. But I want you all to take your time and think about it too. So, so I'm gonna begin. So these are a list of questions just to recognize one's own privilege. So I'm gonna begin. So the first question is, can you be guaranteed to find a public bathroom that is safe and equipped for you to use? Can you be sure to find a picture of someone whose gender expression resembles yours somewhere on a magazine rack? Can you be reasonably sure that whether to check the male or female box on a form? Can you be reasonably sure that your choice of a checkbox on such forms will not subject you to legal prosecution of fraud or misinterpretation of identity? Do other people consider your lifestyle a mental illness? Can you be sure that your children will not be harassed at school because of your gender? Do teachings about your national and cultural history acknowledge the existence of people of your gender identity? Can you be reasonably sure that when dating someone new, they will be interested in getting to know you, your personality over and above your medical history? And then the last question, can you undress in a public changing room without risk of being assaulted or reported? Okay, go back. So these are a lot of questions, and if it was easy for you to answer these questions, it shows that you don't have to use a lot of energy to express yourselves to people. Like it shows that you have a lot of privilege here because because cisgenders, commonly female and male, generally spend less energy to be understood by others. And when somebody doesn't need to express their gender identity to others, this is called gender privilege. So I'm sharing this just to be mindful of one's own privilege, of things that I know I don't have to worry about when I'm like, for example, when I'm gonna check the male or female box, that's something I don't have to worry about, but somebody who identifies other like in the LGBTQ community, that's not being inclusive for them. So I'm going to go into the next slide and talk more about other common privileges. Citizenship is a privilege because you can vote and you have more rights, more resources too provided by the government as well. I put in a bullet of being white is also another privilege because I'm talking about like back then, if you're white or light skin, you got natural citizenship. People of color were granted this. They had to fight to get citizenship, and there's still a lot of people of color that are undocumented that are still fighting through this, and it's a privilege, and it ties back from years back in time, and it's still like playing a big factor right now. Being able-bodied is also a privilege. You don't have to worry about transporting or how you're going to get to somewhere. Like you don't have to rely on people to help you out. Like you're already going to get there. And then income too is also a privilege. And then generational wealth is also a privilege. So with generational wealth, let me see. So by generational wealth, it's like money's already coming from the family. There's no financial issues, and it's a solid foundation of money. And then something I also wanted to point out is having a laptop right now is also a privilege, and just being in this workshop, not a lot of people can afford it. And like, even though I wish they were here, like I wish we could be here presently too. It's also a privilege of like the everything that we have, like even like the room that you have in the to concentrate to do your work, like mini office. That's also a privilege. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, and now we're going to do an activity. So for this activity, I just want you all to do it on your own. It's just more like a self-reflection activity. So I encourage you all to have a paper or a pencil, and if you don't have that with you, that is okay. If you have your phone, definitely write those responses on your phone, or if you don't have any of that, definitely I just want you to think about it in your head. So I'm going to give you all 5 minutes to think about these. These are really deep questions that ask a lot about your identity. So I even answer these questions and they're really hard for me to answer, but I just want you all to just be mindful of your identity and just answer these questions. So I'm gonna begin. I'm gonna play some music in the background, and then when the music stops down, that's when we stop. So I'm gonna give you all 5 minutes. So here are the questions. Oh my God. All right, thank you all for participating. Sorry, I was having tech issues. My song, some other song played, but yeah, we'll gonna move on to the next slide. And thank you all for participating. I hope that you all able to get more insight on this activity, on just having the time to reflect and thinking about your own identity and like asking yourself like what you wish you knew more about, for example, and what makes you feel more discriminated, for example. So I just hope that this was a good, useful time to do some reflection. So overall, I encourage you all to keep using these analytical tools of intersectionality. They are really important. I wish I would have used them in high school and questioned a lot more things. So like when it comes to like history of back then, like being able to question like, oh, why did this happen and why? So I just want you all to be mindful of that and also of your privileges too. We don't often recognize privileges. I know I don't. I sometimes you're just used to how you're living and like we don't take the time to think about like what affects us or what advantages we have. So definitely I encourage you all to be an ally when it comes to privileges. And what an ally means is being a supporter. For example, like supporting like the LGBT community, undocumented community. What it means is that you're supporting them and you're learning there. You're not just assuming, and you're always willing to educate yourself more to find ways and resources to support them. And then another thing is just to educate yourself more. It never hurts to learn more. It just, like it just opens up more knowledges and opens up more opportunities as well. So definitely encourage you all to have an open mindset. So these are some books that I found that are just recommended books. Feel free to take a picture or screenshot these. These are amazing books that I learned throughout my college experience. So this bridge called My Back is about the author is lesbian, or living in a Chicano neighborhood and finding her ways and like coming out and like like prejudice as well. And then Brilliant Perfection is a disability rights activism. And then the Kambahi River Collective has a lot of feminist work. And then Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women on just the slide I showed. So now I'm gonna move on to the next slide. And I want to say thank you all for being here. This is my contact info in case you want more information or have any questions, or I have a lot of articles, so feel free to message me and I could send you a lot of stuff if you're ever curious. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And so these are just some resources here. So feel free to screenshot. I got this on Instagram and this is the follower I found it from. So really, really good resources to have and to use in case you ever need them, or pass them to a friend. Feel free to do so. So that wrapped up the end of the presentation. I know at the end I was wanting to do like a breakout session where we answer some questions that would be like on the Padlet. So I'd be happy to do that. Maybe now, if that's possible. But yeah, thank you all. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we will be going into those breakout rooms, and then we'll be there for a little bit, and then afterwards, we will come back here. And if you have any questions for Stephanie, please be sure to send them to Tanya, who is named Questions Ask Me. And then in the meantime, sorry to keep saying and then, give Stephanie a round of applause using your reactions. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. That was very informative, and I think most of us may have learned something new. So, Mary, whenever you are ready, if you want to tell us when we will go into breakout rooms.
Yeah, and actually, before we go into breakout rooms, we're going to do questions because I know Tanya got a lot of questions from our participants. So let's do the questions first, and then we will do the breakout rooms.
Sounds good.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And once again, thank you so much for that presentation, Stephanie. It was very informative. I enjoyed every single bit, and it's always good to always learn how to like check ourselves and how we can be better allies and so on. So the first question here that I have is, what is your advice on calling out a student during class or checking a teacher?
Yes. So my advice on that is I recommend to not like point fingers at them or make them feel bad. Open up the space so that it's a comfortable atmosphere for people to feel like open and like also welcome. Like you never really want to point people and make them feel bad for not knowing something, and sometimes it's not their fault that they don't know something, it's the system's fault for not educating that person. So definitely like have the open space and just be, you know, like I practice on that. I practice on being patient with them and having the space open and welcoming and just not attacking them, but having the like inviting them into this conversation. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. So the next question here is, how do I educate racist, sexist family members who really are set in their ways?
That is a good question. And from my experiences, whenever it comes to educating my own family, like I know a lot of my family, for example, they're like, they say things about skin color. I'm like valuing like lighter skin than darker skin. So I question them, where did that come from? Like, where did those thoughts come from? And it came from like colonizations when like Europeans came, and the idea of like white supremacy, white as pure, white as beautiful and everything. Like I question them, like, why do you think that way you do, and why? Like, and then I noticed that a lot of people get speechless, and like it just helps question themselves of like why they think about that. So it helps them like check in themselves too and reflect as well. I hope, does that answer your question?
I believe so, because they have not replied on the chat. However, we do have a follow-up question, or excuse me, they said wait. I think they might be typing. Okay, I am going to unmute them. Let's see here.
Hi, sorry. Okay, so for example, I invited my little sister over to just listen at the very least. She said, no, thank you. There's a lot of, my dad is a Black Latino. There's a lot of N-words going around in the house. We're in quarantine, so I'm kind of stuck with them. There's a lot of, all lives matter. A lot of, if you wear revealing clothes, it's your fault. A lot of those stuff that, this has been like my entire life. And that's why I'm asking, how can I educate? Because for example, I'll bring something, I'm like, no, that's not what Black Lives Matters mean. It's, it's not your fault. But they're just not willing to. So I guess my question is there any hope for them, or should I just give up?
That's a really good question. And it's not always like, like you're not always in charge to be educating everybody. Like, like we could all do that. But yeah, it takes time and it's hard. Like for me, like my parents, like some of my family members have that mindset too. And it takes time, a lot of time and privilege, like a lot of time and patience. So one thing that I've been doing that has helped my parents is like, my mom for sure, she loves to read. So I'm giving her like a lot of feminism and empowering books, and that's have helped her like become more aware. My dad, on the other hand, he hates reading. So he'll watch anything that's good on TV. So I'll find any good Netflix shows and I'll show him that. And that's the way people get educated different ways. There's no right or wrong way. It's just the fact of like bringing this conversation in an interesting way that will get their attention too. But at the same time will like not get them like mad at the same time, because like I know there's some things that are just really controversial to say, but you just have to say it in an open manner, and that's the part about like not attacking them, making it open and inviting them to that conversation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, they mentioned thank you. All right, so the next question was also like a follow-up from one of the students, is how do you learn to talk about this in Spanish? Do you have resources?
Yeah, I actually saw something, a post on Instagram. So one thing I encourage you all to do, if you all have Instagram or social media, like definitely follow pages when it comes to like anything with feminist work. And when I mean feminist, you like don't have to be a woman, a girl to be a feminist. Anybody can be a feminist. I know I have friends that are guys that are feminists. And what that means is just learning things through a different perspective. That's how it is. Like, yes, fighting for equality, but what it means is like learning things through a different lens. And definitely I encourage you to follow pages like that, watch, you know, shows or listen to podcasts, like, and just staying more aware and finding resources. I know for our Instagram, I got one of my resources in Spanish, like how to say, translate words in social justice in Spanish. So I could find that and then I could send that your way too. But yeah, I found it all, everything all on Instagram, and that's how I got like more aware on like the words choices I'm using, so I'm more comfortable like speaking it with my family now. Like you just gotta, you know the vocabulary as well. So everything I got it on Instagram.
Yes, thank you. So we're gonna have to do one more question here. How do you usually check your privilege? What advice would you give? For an example, I do not have family members who are farm workers. However, I am privileged not to work under the hot summer sun, but how can I use my privilege to help farm workers get the rights they deserve?
Definitely by like being mindful of the resources that there are, also being like mindful of being like, for me, I'll share a personal story. Like for me, like I got to go to school, I got to go to college. My parents didn't. The furthest of education they went to was middle school, so they don't have a lot of knowledge of what I've gotten to. So what I do is like educate my parents, and I also want to let you all know about like doing things like voting, doing census work. Like voting just definitely helps people. Like you have that, if you can vote, definitely use that privilege and vote. I know like I have been doing a lot of phone banking, encouraging people. Like if you're undocumented, you could also do phone banking and explain the reasons why. And just using your privilege, if you speak English, use that privilege and talk to people that like a higher authority, for example, if you speak Spanish, speak to people that, you know, that do. And so I also do want to encourage you all to do the census as well. Not only do people know about the census, but one thing I want to let you know that not a lot of people know is that people of color were not counted in the census back then. If you're poor, you weren't counted. So I encourage you all to do that. And what the census funds is, it funds like education, it funds women's and nutritional programs. And this is money that is given to people in need, like financial assistance, like FAFSA. That's what the census funds too. So I definitely encourage y'all, if you can, like if you have the privilege and knowledge, share this information to others, because not a lot of people know what it is. A lot of people don't trust like the census, for example. And so just like the fact of like knowing the resources around you and just being educated more, you could help a lot of people. Because if I know this before, but now that I do, I definitely like reach out to people.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we do have another one as well. Let's see here. Why did you decide to do a degree on gender and sexuality studies?
So I did, yes, that's a good question. So I have a lot of answers, but the reason why is because machismo is really common in my family, and gender, women, sexuality studies not only taught me about like gender, but it taught me a lot about mental health, disability rights, LGBTQ rights. A lot of things have tied into there in the Indigenous perspective as well, and it has taught me things that I did not know about, and it has helped me to get like to do like a lot of critical theory, and like a lot of like it just made me see things differently. So I really fell in love with the major. Definitely encourage you all to major in gender studies, because now a lot of people like in corporate positions are looking for people for the diverse perspective. So I definitely encourage you all to have that. So it's a whole lot. You learn a lot of things that you question and that you just never really questioned before, and we have a lot of conversations on things that are not talked about. So that's why I did it, because it's a very empowering degree where we learn a lot about things that were not taught and hidden, and things that were like even destroyed and burned. So we're just getting that information. We're learning things, like we're learning the truth.
Thank you. And then those are all the questions that we have for today. But thank you so much for answering that question about machismo. It resonates so much with a lot of Latina women, or just in general, like mujeres all over. So thank you so much for bringing that up and letting it know that it still exists. So with that, I will hand over the mic to Liz. But if we can give one last round of applause with your reactions to Stephanie.
Yay! Thank you, Stephanie, again. I will actually pass the mic to Mary for the breakout rooms. if that's okay.
Yes, now that everybody got to ask their questions, we were gonna send everybody to a breakout room for about 6 minutes. So, and then I believe we're gonna go to the Padlet and just reflect on those questions that our presenter today has prepared for us. So, Tanya, before we go, can you share the Padlet, please, for the reflection questions? Okay, we're just gonna give it a minute for our chat moderator to send us a Padlet. Okay, so your facilitators are gonna facilitate this conversation and just make sure you have access to the Padlet. All right, we'll see you back in a bit. Hey Juan, let me assign you to a group. um, Oh, I was on mute. I'm like, hopefully everybody, oh yeah, it's gonna start bringing people back in like 30 seconds. Okay, I will remember to do the picture.
Welcome back, everybody. I think this is everybody. I hope it is. So that concludes our presentation for today. I think we have some final announcements, which are just about, oh, yes, I'm forgetting. Thank you, Medi. So before we close out, if you all want to turn on your cameras, we're going to take a picture for today's presentation. We'll give you a few seconds, and then Medi will give us a countdown.
Yeah, ooh, everybody is on camera now. This is so cool. And then I don't know if y'all have been following us on Instagram, but we posted a picture and it looks really cool. So go check it out. It's on Instagram and everybody's is on there. Okay, do you want to do the countdown list?
Yeah, so I'm going to count down from 5 so you can pose. And then we'll only be doing 1. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yay.
Thank you all. So now for those announcements. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you again to Stephanie for being here. Announcements for the next presentation. It is taking place this Friday, starting at 5 p.m. And our presenter is La Roxe. They will be doing a 2-hour presentation titled De aquí, pero también de aquí y de aquí. We will not be having community groups on this day because she will be using the full 2 hours to do a workshop that'll be engaging. And I'm really excited to see it because I've heard really awesome things about them. Another announcement is again reminding you all